Welcome to this week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast, where experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based in Kingston upon Thames are invited on to share their story with us. I'm your host, Amir Rochalina.
This week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast is brought to you by Holland Harnham Wills, a financial planning and wealth management firm based in Kingston upon Thames. Holland Harnham Wills specialises in retirement planning for senior professionals and successful business owners. Visit hhw-uk.com to start feeling more relaxed and confident about your financial future.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. I'm joined today by Nick Robinson. Nick and his wife Hayley are the founders of Incognito Bars, a collection of playful taverns with fanciful decor, specializing in flaming and smoking alcoholic concoctions. What's unique about Nick is how he and his team deliver the experience that they're aiming to create through the decor, the ingredients, and the drinks, and by telling a story to their customers. And be sure to listen to the end, where Nick shares with us some of his go-to DIY cocktails to delight friends and family at home. So whether you're interested in knowing more about the world of bars and hospitality, or would like to know more about what it takes to run a successful independent business, then I hope you enjoy this episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. Welcome, Nick Robinson, to the Inside Kingston Podcast. Nick, I'm really excited about this conversation because, well, with a bit of luck, we are actually starting to phase out of this lockdown business that we've been in for the last year. And as we start being let out, just like me, a lot of our listeners are really looking forward to getting back to normality or something that resembles more of normal life. And of course, you're in the process of launching this really interesting new cocktail bar here in Kingston. So I'm sure our listeners are keen to hear more from you on that, and also to learn from you because, of course, you've got a lot of expertise in the hospitality sector. But to kick off this conversation, I'd like to go back in time, if that's okay. So, Nick, where did you grow up?
Okay, so thanks for having me on your show. First and foremost, it's an honour. I grew up on the Isle of Wight. I was born in Islington, North London. My parents moved to the Isle of Wight when I was about 18 months. So I was raised and grew up on the island in Ryde. Moved over to Shanklin as I got into my adult life. But yeah, predominantly I've been on the island up until 3 years ago when we moved to Winchester to open up the first Incognito. Me and my wife and I, we've got a lovely little boutique bed and breakfast on the island, 14-bedroom bed and breakfast on the top of the cliff in Shanklin. And hotel life's lovely, but it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we've done a couple of seasons. And in the end, I was like, look, we've got to come up with something. And, we've always had other restaurants and bars and other hospitality venues on the island, but I just wanted to come up with something completely different, something completely crazy. And I knew that the clientele on the island, that sort of customer base, I didn't have the confidence that it would have done what we wanted it to do. So we started searching for sites on the mainland and come across a lovely one in Winchester.
That's fantastic. And could you tell us a little bit about your career journey, sort of after secondary schooling, but before you set up your business?
Yeah, so I've never had a job as such. I left school as soon as I possibly could. I was never going to be a brain surgeon, that's for sure. A bit of a daydream. I used to sort of just be staring out the window all day and never getting too much done. So I left school as soon as I could. I come from generations of market traders. So I used to, every Saturday, Sunday, I'd be up 5, 6 in the morning, going off to the market with my dad. I think towards the end of school, I used to have every Tuesday off as well to do the market with my dad. I think the school sort of knew about it, and just in the end, they was grateful that I wasn't there. So I'd done that for quite a few years. I went out to Hong Kong and China when I was about 18, 19, and started importing toys and some other bits and bobs, and started selling them on the markets and other sort of route to market as well. And then I've kind of had some amazing feasts and some pretty big famines as well. Living on the island, it's very seasonal. It's kind of through the summer you're eating steak, and through the winter you're kind of bread and water. So it was very much like that. But I've always, I suppose, been very entrepreneurial. Always wanted to work for myself. Always sort of coming up with an idea and seeing how it goes. But I got into hospitality then. When I was about 25. Got into hospitality. A bar became available in Ryde. Used to be called Joe de Flo's. It was quite a famous bar. Mark King opened it from level 42. It used to be his. It was called Joe de Flo's after his children, Josie, Florrie and Darcy.
Oh, wow.
So I ended up getting my hands on that and run that for about 8 to 10 years on the island. Opened up another couple of places over there and then sold them in order to get over to Winchester, really, and start that project. I managed to talk my mum and dad into running the hotel for my wife and I, so they're still there now doing that a few years on. I think they enjoy it, although you speak to them in September and they've had enough, but by February, after a few months off, they're ready to go again. So, and that's where the journey started, really.
That's fantastic. And Nick, you've mentioned now the business in Winchester a couple of times, and that's really pertinent because it's that idea that you're expanding now further into Kingston as well, isn't it? So could you tell us a little bit about your business today? Yeah,
of course. Yeah. So we opened Winchester Incognito in April 2018. I wanted to come up with a more of an immersive cocktail experience. So we pushed the boundaries of tradition and come up with some crazy serves and just really see how far we can take that immersive experience. So we found a beautiful 800-year-old site in Winchester. Wow. Beautiful. I mean, the walls are 6 foot thick stone, big flagstone floor. I mean, it's a stunning building. It used to be a hospital, and you've still got the alcoves all cut out into the stone where the belongings used to go next to the beds. And so it's got some real age to it and character. So we found that fantastic site. Winchester seemed to be that sort of demographic that we were looking to aim to. So we went all in for it and opened April 2018 and I'll be completely honest with you, it's gone better than I ever would have dreamed. I mean, we did really sort of push the boundaries. I remember the first time our first cocktail that went out on opening night was, it was Like Clockwork, it was called, and it's served on a stand, and the garnish is a working clock automaton, so like a bird cage, and it just hangs over the top of the cocktail. And I remember when it went out, I kind of had my hands over my eyes because it was a little bit, are people going to like it? Are they just going to think it's too ridiculous or what? But turns out people absolutely loved it. And then that now wouldn't even get on the menu. It's not crazy enough. So there's some real amazing cocktails out there, and we just try and play with people's perceptions. So we'll incorporate beautiful smells, so it will look amazing. Some will have moving parts. We'll have some that come with water fountains, hot air balloons, clouds, fog. So it's a real sort of multi-sensual experience. Yeah. So
just sorry to butt in, Nick, but for our listeners that are hearing us at this moment and going, well, how experimental and experiential can this actually be? I urge you to pause this conversation and go to Nick's Instagram and the Incognito Bars Instagram, which will be linked on the show notes, just so you can start having an idea of what Nick is talking about. I mean, these are like completely out of the box thinking when it comes to cocktails.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we really, really do push the boundaries. We have one cocktail that I touched on is our Geisha's Garden. So it comes complete with a Japanese Zen garden and complete with a water fountain that gets activated at the table. So we'll place it, one of our storytellers places it in front of the customer, and then they activate it with a dragon teapot, and then there's an oriental fog descends over the table and it activates the water fountain. And so it's real, I mean, it's an Instagrammer's dream, really. I mean, it's full of content. As soon as you arrive at Incognito, one of our storytellers will give you a top hat or a military hat, and so you're immersed in a whole new world, really.
That's fantastic. And Nick, you used the story there. You used the word there, storyteller. And I want to pick your brains on this, because for me, a good restaurant or a good cocktail bar, it wins or loses on its ability to tell a story, as it were, through its menu and through its ingredients or through its drinks. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? How do you incorporate that into Incognito?
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, from every stage when you walk into Incognito, it's designed to play with your perceptions and blow your mind. I mean, from our amazing new site here in Kingston, you have to walk up through a jungle staircase, and then we open the big double doors and it brings you into this stunning room. And every single element to that, every element from the moment you step in to the moment you leave, is just as important for us. So we don't have front of house staff or waiters or waitresses. They are fundamental to people's experience. So when you're greeted at the door by one of our storytellers, they'll sit you down and they'll talk you through our menu, which, I mean, people buy our menus. You can buy it because they actually come. They've got some fantastic stories. Each of the big signature cocktails comes with a story as to where Chadwick Smithfield, who's our fictional owner, we can touch on him in a bit, where he come across it in his life of sort of foolhardy adventures, we say. So our storytellers play a massive part in that, and I think it's just right that we call them something different to just, you know, front of house or waiters or waitresses, because they are all so much more than that. They play with fire, they get very involved in all the sort of moving parts and the theatrics of the cocktails. So yeah,
we're kindred spirits there. We really are, because my business has, well, nothing to do with your business. It's completely different fields. And we not only hire for a good culture fit, like you've mentioned there, but we also empower our team to think of themselves as a lot more than whatever function they're doing. That they really have to think of themselves as part of the company that delivers this particular service that we deliver to our clients. I love the way you said that about your team members seeing themselves as a part of the storytelling of the whole place, of the whole business. That's just awesome.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I've always made a big point to all the managers that work underneath us that I'm not, to be completely honest with you, too worried about experience. You know, we can train people and bring them in as long as they're passionate and motivated and are willing to learn and want to be a part of our journey. To me, that's far outweighs any experience. You know, we can bring them in, we can teach them how we want them to serve our drinks or the stories we want them to say. But as long as they're passionate and they're motivated and they want to be a part of our journey, then, you know, anyone's more than welcome. That's a lot more important to me than experience, that's for sure.
That's brilliant. Now let's just pull that thread on storytelling a bit further. So tell us about Chadwick Smithfield. I love this concept.
Okay, so Chadwick Smithfield, he started off. I've got an artist out in the States that we buy some fantastic pieces for. I started buying them actually for a bar that I opened on the island, and then they went over into the hotel. And then as we was coming up with Incognito, I think I was sat in the bar at the hotel with my wife, and we were sort of looking around, and we saw Chadwick's portrait on the wall. Well, he wasn't Chadwick then, so I think we'd had a couple of glasses of wine and said, wouldn't it be cool if what we gave a whole backstory to it? So Chadwick Smithfield ended up being the fictional owner of Incognito. He's a bit of a lovable rogue, I think it's fair to say. There's an introduction to him in the menu. So he's a bit of a ducker and diver, and he acquired a lot of the antiques that you'll find around us in dubious circumstances, let's just say. So a little bit of fun there. And then as we've grown and as the menus have evolved and we've come up with new menus, we're on menu 4 down in Winchester, we've brought in new characters as well. So you've got Lucinda Faraday, who is a lynx dressed fabulously, and there's about 3 or 4 other characters, and then you've got the twins as well, which are 2 lions dressed in suits, and they're kind of, I suppose they're Chadwick's heavies if things ever go wrong.
Very cool. And you mentioned then, Nick, something that to me again is just, it's interesting to sort of pick your brains on the mindset that you enter, the entrepreneurial mindset that you enter into a venture like this with, right? Which is this business of the place itself, the cocktails themselves, the whole experience being Instagrammable, I think was the word you used. Now, of course, our listeners don't have the benefit of seeing your image, which I'm seeing here for the purposes of this chat, and the background, which is the up and coming Kingston Incognito Bar, is just stunning. And I said this to you before we started recording. It's just beautiful. Now, other businesses can learn from this too, right? That many businesses can learn from using social media in a way to create attention to their brand and obviously let potential customers know they exist. How do you think about that when it comes to the cocktails, the actual thing you serve, but also the ambiance, the staff, the story, and everything else?
Yeah, I think it's important to have a really strong brand direction. I think as I look back at some of my previous hospitality ventures, I think a lot of people and a lot of places do this. They try to please too many people, and you end up watering down your brand, and your original vision ends up just watering down. And in the end, you end up a bit of a beige and style venue, and you're never going to please everyone. You can't be beige enough to please everybody. So I think as I've moved forward and this has evolved in my mind and we've sort of gone with it, I think it's been massively important to us that I have a very, very strong sense of direction. I know exactly where we want to go with it. It's important. I think times have changed a lot as well. People don't just go to the pub. You can't just serve them a Gordon's in a half pint glass with one lump of ice and a Schweppes tonic. People don't want that. They're more than willing to pay that little bit extra, but have a fantastic experience. And I think I just wanted to see how far we could take that. And come up with real crazy venues, but with excellent service, and just give people that experience that I think people want more of now. Given the restrictions and the whole COVID thing, we've only ever been table service anyway. We're reservations only. We only ever have maximum 6 at all times anyway. So for me, it's really important that if you had a couple, say, that hadn't been out, they've been wanting to come and visit us for 3 months, they've been saving up and they've managed to get a babysitter and they're sat here, they've been excited, it's the only time they can ever get to you. And then you sit them next to a table of 10 that are really enjoying themselves and making a bit of a racket, it would detract from their evening, that couple. And to be totally honest with you, that too, to me, and their experience is more important to me than the money that 10 may spend. So our whole ethos is about that customer experience and protecting that experience and sticking true to our values. And some people don't like it, but that's fine. I'm happy with that because it's not for them, I suppose. We create crazy, fully immersive cocktails, and if you want that, and you want a completely different environment, fantastic experience, and to build memories in a lovely, cozy environment where you can have a decent conversation, then we're the place for you. But I do also appreciate that we don't please everyone, but that's fine also. So
yeah, absolutely. And look, again, we're kindred spirits in that front. We set out firmly as a business to be very niche in what we do within the financial planning space. And that means that we can't and we don't want to serve a lot of other potential financial planning issues that we're more than qualified to serve. But we decide not to because we want to be exceptionally good at what we want to be good at. And that screams to what you're saying there. You want to offer the service you want to offer to who is interested in that service in a way that exceeds their expectation every time. That's brilliant.
Yeah, that's it. And at the beginning, it was difficult because you've really got to, I remember one time I went home and I was kind of like, is this too difficult? This whole concept, is it too hard? And I was having a bit of a weak moment and I went to bed and my wife was like, well, look, whatever you decide, we'll go with it. And I woke up in the morning, I was like, no, it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Good night's sleep. And because service is it was different to anything I'd ever done. And the prep behind the scenes for what we try and create is huge. There's as many hours behind the scenes, probably twice as many hours behind the scenes to create all the prep and to get everything ready just for a service. So there's so much work that went into it. I think at the beginning I might have underestimated it, but we stuck to our guns and I had a real strong vision as to where we wanted to be. And thankfully, it seems to have paid off so far. But I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm pretty fearless, I suppose, when it comes to starting businesses up or just going for it. But I also worry about everything all the time, So I'm constantly, I'm lying in bed worrying about what's going to happen the next day. I like to think that if anything doesn't go right, it's not because I haven't put the work in or that you haven't, I leave no stone unturned, I'd like to say.
That's it. Now, let me switch gears on you slightly, Nick, because for our listeners who fancy their hand at making a cocktail at home, what would be your sort of DIY go-to cocktail when hosting, say, a dinner party at your place?
It depends. I mean, I love an old fashioned.
Yeah.
A real classic old fashioned, I do. And we've got a few guys who work for me that make a really fantastic one. And however much I try and replicate it at home, it's never quite the same. So I do like a proper drink, an old fashioned or a Manhattan, perfect Manhattan with a little bit of added maraschino liqueur in there as well. So a little bit hint of cherry. But I think as crowd pleasers, a kind of an espresso martini twist on something similar like that, always goes down well. And then maybe, an old fashioned or a Manhattan just to finish off the night. It's a little bit of a nightcap, but I think you can't really go wrong, and they're easy to replicate at home as well. So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Nick, what are some of the key business lessons that you've learned throughout your life?
It's a tough one. I've had some. I mean, you learn more from your mistakes, that's for sure, 100%. And your failure. Key business lessons. I think one, like what I was touching on a minute ago, is to have a really strong sense of direction, but also at the same time be willing to listen. I mean, if you're so stuck in your ways that you're not willing to listen to feedback at all, then if you've got everyone telling you one thing, then maybe the crowds are right, and maybe you should look at it and pivot and change your business model slightly. But if you've got one or two people, if the majority of people love what you're doing and one or two people don't like it, then just accept that's fine, because you don't want to please everybody. If you please everyone, you just end up like another generic brand, that's out there. Be willing to pivot, but have a strong sense of direction. Don't do it for the money, I think. Don't have money as the driving force to your business and what you want to do. I mean, we all think and we'd all love that at the end of it, it all works out fabulous and money's never an issue and we can all, ride off into the sunset. But I think the businesses that has had the least success in my lifetime has been when I think money was the focus, or when I thought, money was the big driving force behind it. I think now when you learn more, you look at money as a fuel and to continue that journey. And ultimately the money is the result of that journey. And if you get things right, then that'll be fine. But I look at, money and finance now as the fuel just to keep continuing that journey and to see how far we can take it. Don't be frightened of anything, but worry about everything. Yeah, maybe that's a good one. So don't be frightened. Don't be frightened. Take that leap. A lot of people, I think they call it their lizard brain, don't they? They kind of all got an idea, they want to do it, but they're so petrified to jump ship because they're going to lose that steady income from their job, and people just don't take that jump. But be fearless, go for it, and what's the worst that can happen? Really, it doesn't work and you can start again. I've done that a few times, and you just sort of get up, dust yourself off, have a couple of bad days, and then you're back on it. But at the same time, be fearless, but worry about all of it, because worrying is what gets you out of bed in the morning. Worrying is what makes sure that you don't leave anything to chance.
Well, and especially as you're alluding to, especially if the worry thing that one is worrying about is the attention to detail, the little things that are going to make the business just that much better for that particular niche. I mean, that's exciting to wake up with worries like that, because you just want to be better, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm a big stickler. I believe in what's called the 5% rule. And when we have big staff meetings, I'm constantly talking about the 5%. And the way that is that the majority of businesses that are out there in the restaurants and in the hospitality sector get 95% of everything right. That's why they're still going. If they didn't, chances are that they'd be out of business pretty soon. But it's that last 5% that makes a business remarkable. It's that last 5% that really sets you apart from everybody else. And I think, and the easiest way that I explain it to staff, and we call it the 5%, is because that 5% can manifest itself in any way. It can be as you walk up to the door, there's cigarette butts on the floor from the previous night. You walk into the maitre d' and on the side is a blue roll or some hand sanitizer spray. You can, it can be anything. So when I say to people, rather than saying, can you pick the cigarette butts up, or look, these haven't been done, or that, by calling it the 5%, people understand it as a bigger thing and understand what you're trying to say. So now, I listen to bar staff as we're sending out a cocktail, and one of the golden ducks is quite not gold enough. Someone will walk up, they'll point it, and they'll be like 5%. And then the staff are like, oh yeah, perfect. So it covers everything. People understand that last 5% is what makes us remarkable, I think, and what really sort of sets you aside. So yeah, it's an easy way of covering all of them tiny little bits that add up to that slightly better experience.
Very cool. Nick, when you look back at your career journey to date, what are you most proud of?
I think right now, really, what we've done here, if I'm completely honest with you, it was a lot bigger task than I probably gave it credit for when we first signed. So if it wasn't, like I said earlier on, if it wasn't for COVID, I would have been under a lot more pressure, because we have had the added benefit of extra time to get it done. But what we've achieved here, yeah, I'm pretty proud of that, and what we've got to come, really. I'm not one, if I'm completely honest with you, to ever be too proud about anything. I don't know if that makes sense, because I know that we've only just begun really on our journey, and I'm not one to turn around and say, oh, we've done this, we did, because in my eyes we're at the very, very start. So that's all to come. Hopefully in 10-15 years time I can look back and this will all be something that I'm proud of, but at this moment in time I've got a long way to go before I start.
Yeah, it's all about the journey. I'm with you on that one. And what next for you and your business, Nick? Are there, of course, any projects in the pipeline, including perhaps the launch of the Kingston venue that you can tell us about? Yeah,
so at this moment in time, no, we haven't. I have always got my eyes on new sites. I would love to think that if this opens and does what we think it's going to do, along with downstairs, then in a few months after opening, we can start looking at new sites. I've always had my eyes on Bath. It's lovely. I think our brand would fit in perfectly there. But since moving here, because I moved to Surbiton just before Christmas in preparation to open, we've been driving around quite a lot, and I think there's good enough distance between the two that Richmond could quite possibly, I think we'd fit in very well there, and I think there's enough distance between the two that they wouldn't affect each other. So I'm looking ahead. A lot of people, when COVID first struck and lockdowns come in, the majority of bars, you'll see they all started doing takeaway cocktails and that sort of stuff, whereas I was more interested in building for post-COVID, I suppose. I wanted to put all the groundwork in. I didn't want to take any of my time and sort of mind power on concentrating on something else. I'd much rather have built what we have done now and then look forward to the future, ready for when the world gets back to some normality. But yeah, we're definitely Richmond, Windsor, possibly Oxford, Cambridge. Yeah, so hopefully years to come there'll be a few more.
Exciting times ahead.
Yeah, definitely. I'd like to think so, but I also know that things can change in a heartbeat. So, like I say, yeah, I'll worry about everything.
Fair enough. So, as we start to wrap up, I'd just like to ask you a few quick fire questions that our listeners are always interested in. So, Nick, what do you do to relax outside of the office?
I like to find inspiration wherever. Normally me and my wife would try and go away as much as we can, a couple of days here and there, whether it's through Europe or, one nice holiday a year. But I love working, to be fair. And I couldn't think of anything better than sitting on a beach in the Caribbean with a cocktail on my laptop, sort of doing bits and catching up with emails and planning the future and looking for sites and coming up for inspiration. So that is my downtime, to be honest with you. That's how I relax. So it doesn't feel like work, to be fair.
Excellent. And are there any books that you've recently read that you'd recommend to our listeners?
I'd like to say that I've read about 10, 12 books in the last 12 months, but I say that to my wife and she says, no, you haven't. You've listened to audiobooks. Yeah. So I said, well, it's the same thing. It's just a different route to the same place. So I listened to Seth Godin. I think he's fantastic. He's a marketing guru. So Purple Cow, Linchpin by him, 2 fantastic books. Simon Sinek, I've read a lot of his stuff. Start With Why, I think is a fantastic book. And I'd urge anyone to go and see his TED Talk, Start With Why. It's 15 minutes of your life. And if you're starting a business, I think it's invaluable. Adam Grant, Originals, his book is pretty good. So I think a lot of stuff I listen to or read is motivational, sort of business-minded books, stuff that I can sort of take on. I listen to a lot of stuff in the background while I'm doing work here. I'll have it on the speakers, or if I'm driving down to Winchester, I'd rather listen to an audio book than music, to be fair, yeah. Yeah,
and I think, to be fair, Nick, there's been a lot more take-up of audiobooks over these last 12 months. Right? So I'm with you. My short commute, as it was pre-COVID, I used to fill that up with audiobooks, just going and coming. And the interesting thing is, I heard, as you said, I listened to 1 or 2 audiobooks where I have the physical copy as well of the book, but the audiobook, the author read it, and they also added additional comments as they were reading it, which gave another view to the book. So again, I'm sure that our listeners have picked up on this already. The whole listening to a book through Audible or any other app, it's a different experience to, as you said, arrive at maybe the same information or the same sort of light bulb moments that you might get through that author or through a story. Yeah, and I appreciate it more when the author's read the book. When you get some just generic guy with the same tone, and this is his 10th book in 3 days, it just doesn't feel the same. But when you're listening to the guy, you've heard him in podcasts before, I feel it really sort of, I absorb it that much better. I sort of take it that much more serious. But yeah, some brilliant books out there. Cool. And are there any movies or TV shows that you've recently watched that you'd recommend to our listeners? We've just got around to watching Lucifer. So through lockdown, my wife, we sat down and watched that. That was quite good. But in general, I'll be honest, I watch very little TV. She forced me to sit down and watch a couple of series, and I did. I get into them and do enjoy them in the end, but I try not to. And if I'm completely honest, once I finished Lucifer, I said, that's it. We can't watch any more series because I don't want it takes up too much of your time. I don't want to get home and then think about the next episode of that. I'd rather be concentrating on finishing the menu or something else. So yeah, makes a lot of sense. And finally, where can people go to find out more about Incognito Kingston and about your other businesses? Yeah, so the best place really to give you a visual idea, although I'll be honest with you, absolutely nothing is like coming into the real thing and seeing it, is our Instagram, which is Incognito Cocktail Bars. We've also got Chadwick's Home Zoology, which is opening downstairs underneath Incognito. So that's a whole new concept. It's more based on classic cocktails served in elegant glassware, and we're growing all of our own botanicals and garnishes in our beautiful greenhouse that's the staircase. I don't know if anyone passing may have seen a jungle pop up in the middle of Kingston by the Thames. So that's also exciting. But yeah, so if you find Chadwick's Home Zoology or Incognito Cocktail Bars on Instagram or incognitobars.co.uk, it'll take you to our websites. But to be honest with you, none of the images really do it justice. You'd have to pop by. And if I'm here and the doors are open, feel free to pop in and I'll give you a tour. Fantastic. That's great. And for the benefit of our listeners, I'll make sure that I add those links to the show notes. Nick, thank you for joining us here on the Inside Kingston podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know your story. Thank you. And you. That wraps up another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Make sure to check out our guests' website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions or know someone who should be a guest on the show, please feel free to get in touch. I would also love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and a 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on some great guests,
and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rate well on iTunes so that others can find and enjoy the show too. Thanks for listening.